let's get started with the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have to dash out at any point, just as a reminder, I will be sending out a recorded version of the webinar to everybody. So my name is William Palmer. I'm in business development with Hamiltonian Systems, and the other presenter today is Ravi Venkatraman, who is the CEO and founder of Hamiltonian Systems. So a little bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today. Briefly, I'll speak about Hamiltonian for those who are uninitiated or perhaps unfamiliar with us. And then we'll get into some of the challenges that sourcing teams face, both from a strategic standpoint, but also from a day-to-day practical standpoint. And then about Kasei, which is our data lifecycle management platform employed by Fortune 500 companies to handle a number of different use cases. And sourcing is the one we're going to highlight today. So from there, we'll talk specifically to how Kasei solves some of those both practical day-to-day sourcing problems, as well as executing on some of the larger strategic missions of a sourcing team. And then we will actually show you Kasei, the screens itself, some of the features and functionality, with special attention being paid to how sourcing folks would use Kasei to execute their day-to-day tasks. And then lastly, we'll summarize and take any questions and show anything that has not been covered fully. So to get right into it, Hamiltonian Systems was founded a little over 17 years ago by Ravi after his work as an Oracle consultant, previously with Deloitte, and it was formed and has continued to execute on a mission to improve data, both data quality and data processes at manufacturing and supply chain companies, not only in the US, but around the world. And we are an Oracle Gold partner, a member of the Oracle Maintenance and Manufacturing Field Advisory Board. And we have, Hamiltonian Systems has implemented Oracle EAM. We've worked in manufacturing and supply chain and other EBS modules, and are part of we're supporting Oracle's transition towards the cloud as well, and are helping clients make that transition seamless. We are headquartered here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we have software development teams both here and in the US, or in India, sorry. So I'll pass on to Ravi, who will take us through sourcing challenges.
Okay, thank you, William. Can everybody hear me well, I guess? Will, are you able to hear me? Okay, good. So today, as Will said, I'm going to go through some of the use cases, particularly related to sourcing, okay, and how Kasei addresses those particular challenges with those use cases, okay. So before that, I was going to briefly talk about the sourcing challenges which normally companies face these days. So if you really look at it, like today in the digital transformation world, everything happens to be like happening very fast. And sometimes, like you got to be very agile and you got to be fast enough. And how much ever you're fast enough, people say you're still not fast enough to compete in the market. Okay, so any strategy for that matter, including sourcing, is basically a balancing act. And primarily, sourcing is a balancing act between the supply market, which consists of your suppliers primarily, and then what kind of impact it has with your business. So the strategy is typically a long-term thing, as any strategy is. But what happens is when you execute that strategy, it becomes like smaller tactical things. And some of the tactical things happen every quarter, sometimes every 6 months and so on. So, for example, reducing the prices and being competitive is always relevant. In every quarter, you want to make sure that you reduce the prices of the products you buy, but still you buy the best quality products, which go into your finished goods, as well as, like even if you're buying your MRO products, whatever you do, the main idea is to keep yourself competitive and increase your margin by reducing the prices. So typically what the sourcing team does is they do the spend analysis, they do commodity analysis based on, like various categories of items or various suppliers and all kinds of analysis they do. So that they can consolidate the data in such a way that they can negotiate with their suppliers or price breaks and so on. That is one of the things which happens constantly in the sourcing teams. And the second thing is, we talked about digital transformation. It is all about like experience, right? So you want to improve the experience of your own users, how they use any systems for that matter, whether it is an EBS system here or an external system, how they integrate, and similarly, how your suppliers integrate with you. So this is an experience and streamlining your purchasing process to ensure that your supply chain is smooth and agile. Okay. So when it comes to Kasei, what we are going to focus is on primarily the execution of these tactical things, which I said, like typically quarterly, which kind of becomes like monthly and then day-to-day basis, right? And so on. So if you really look at what really makes the sourcing data, so there are typically like we have what we call as master data, which do not change quite often. Like, for example, you create a supplier and the supplier remains in your system for a long term. Similarly, with your items and, like sometimes categories, commodities, and so on, right? And then the transaction configuration data, specifically with respect to your Oracle, is something like a sourcing rule assignments, approved supplier list, blanket purchase agreements, and, the categories and so on, right? So this data is also not going to change on a day-to-day basis, but it's going to be like, like every quarter it may change, every 6 months it may change, and so on. So a typical example is when you are executing, so from the previous slide I said, like consolidation of your commodities, consolidation of, like certain items with certain suppliers, etc. So when you do certain things like that, what you're going to do is you are going to move from supplier A to supplier B. And then you have like 5,000 items, right? You got to move quickly. So how do you do that? So typically, whatever method you do, you try to like automate it in some fashion or other. Either you give it to your IT department and they kind of like do certain things to make it faster, or you yourself like have to put it in an Excel spreadsheet and then upload it through some other way into Oracle. See, like all kinds of methods are available. But what I'm trying to say is it is not agile. It is not fast enough. And when doing this, the quality of the data may be lost. Okay. So how do you handle all these things in a manner that it is seamless, not only for your company as a business user, for yourself, and for your supplier, as well as for the benefits of the end user who are using those products that you are buying. Okay, so that is where we say, like Kasei is going to improve the whole experience. Okay, so one of the major philosophies around which Kasei was built is on data. So the data typically has 5 dimensions. So the availability, usability, reliability, relevance, and presentation, and so on. And then each of these 5 dimensions have few elements, okay? Like, for example, reliability has 5 elements, starting with accuracy, integrity, and auditability, and so on. So all these 14 elements and 5 dimensions make up any data. So if you can get all the 14 elements right, as much as possible, and the 5 dimensions of data as much as possible correct, then the data becomes really usable and really valuable for all the data citizens, whether it be your CEO of the company, or whether it is a purchasing buyer, or whether it is even a supplier or a consumer of your company's product, and so on. So this is the philosophy with which Kasei was built. So briefly, I'm going to talk about the Kasei footprint. So what Kasei does is it runs on a cloud instance, which is like an Oracle cloud, and it could be made to run on Oracle on-premise also. But the basic idea of Kasei, whether it runs on Oracle cloud or Oracle, whether it runs on Oracle cloud instance or on-premise, it is able to integrate with your big data, your data lakes, and your time series IoT data. It can handle unstructured data and structured data. All this can be like input into Kasei, and then Kasei can do certain things. It has even some unsupervised and supervised machine learning for certain processes, which I will briefly talk about when we go through those slides. And the good data can be fed back into your ERP systems, like your Oracle, or like the cloud, Oracle cloud applications, or like PeopleSoft and so on. And then the bad data can be fed back into the system for further action, for manual actions, or through some kind of an automated actions, and so on. And finally, let us say the good data or whatever data you have, it needs to be fed back into your data lake. That is also possible in the unstructured manner or structured manner. So it kind of like loops around the entire process, which is what this slide talks about. You have multiple data sources, starting with manual data sources from the applications, from EBS and business intelligence and so on. And then the same thing is with the data destinations. Okay, so what Kasei does is it sits in between, and then it is able to read the data from multiple data sources. And then it is able to go through a process of validating data, enhancing the quality of the data, enriching the data to make it more usable. And finally, it is able to feed the data into your target system. So this is just an example of, it just goes from Oracle EBS and Oracle Cloud to again Cloud and EBS and so on. So it can move from any source to any target and so on. Okay, it could be multiple sources to multiple targets as well. So that is the philosophy with which Kasei is built. And I just wanted to come back to our discussion today, which is on sourcing. By employing Kasei for the sourcing processes, like the data I talked about earlier, right? Like the supplier, the items, and the sourcing rule, approved supplier list, and BPA, and so on. What really happens is these are some measured numbers, okay? So the time to completion of any sourcing activity, it is tremendously increased. And obviously, the data errors and the process errors are less because Kasei is able to orchestrate data through multiple players. It is able to automate data as needed. And in this process, the manual touching of data and waiting on some person to act, all those things are eliminated, and the data errors are reduced. So I said here, like, leverage AI while building data. A simple example I wanted to cover here is, let us say you are building your supplier, right? As you are feeding the supplier information, let us say you have to create the supplier addresses, okay, and the supplier contacts and so on. So Kasei has multiple classification engines. So it is able to use the right engine, right classification engine, and then it is able to validate some data. So, for example, when you are putting an address, you may type whatever address you want, and as you go through the validation process, Kasei will validate using the Google API, Google Address API, okay, or it will use the U.S. Postal Services API, which is, typically for all the addresses in US only. So like that, it is able to validate those addresses, and it will tell you whether it passed successfully with 100% confidence, or it will say, it has 90% confidence that this address is right, and then you can take an action, and then you can say, okay, I approve, and it can go through that. Okay, and primarily it is all about the human-centered automation to make your work easier or to reduce the type of errors what you do. Okay, it is not about how to remove jobs from the humans. It is more about how to enhance the activity of the humans so that the errors are reduced and the process efficiency is achieved and so on. So because it is able to orchestrate data and it is able to provide custom lookups as well as, like lookups from Oracle and other things. It kind of like makes the data governance easy. And the data stewards, they become responsible for their portion of data. Suppose you are collecting a data, suppose you are collecting a data set, let's say for putting a supplier, it may have to go through multiple people to get certain data fed in. Like, for example, the bank information goes to your accounts payable people, right? And some other information goes to some other person, and so on. So by orchestrating it, so each person takes ownership of that particular piece of data, what they're putting, and they make sure that that data is correct, and then it goes through this process, okay? So it is able to integrate with the Oracle EBS and other Oracle solutions like PeopleSoft and so on, and also the cloud applications and other legacy applications. So by doing all this, the dependency on the IT system is reduced so that they are able to serve you better, instead of constantly like telling them to, like, hey, load this data, and then you give them the data and then it errors out and they don't know what exactly the error is because they have to send it back to you because you are the owner of the data. You know what exactly the error they are talking about. Then you correct the data, you send it back to them, and then they load it, right? So those kind of things are eliminated, and even IT departments are able to serve the business users better. So that is from the business perspective. Then from the typical usability perspective, right? So we are not handling with multiple spreadsheets and everything. So you put the data in Kasei and you orchestrate the data. So it is very easy. And the data validation happens in multiple steps. You can, which you can choose and control. Like, for example, every workflow node data can be validated at every workflow node and then made to either pass through the workflow node or fail there and so on. And then you can create custom lookups, which we are going to see in a bit in the demo. And then you are able to reference data through, like either internally creating data in Kasei, or you're going to pull the data from Oracle. Like, for example, unit of measures, right? You already created an Oracle. Oracle is the source of truth. So you are able to simply get the data using the REST API from Oracle and then show it onto Kasei and so on. Okay, and then like any workflow, the basic idea is you get emails, and then from the email directly you are able to go into your action item, and then you are able to open the screen in the Kasei and do whatever you want. Or even after you log into Kasei, you will be able to see what actions are pending on you. So primarily, only actionable items are given to users. Like your supplier may have like 20,000 rows of data, but they don't have to really look at 20,000 rows of data. Today, if they're acting on 5 suppliers, if they're working with 5 suppliers, they will exactly see those 5 rows. And then they finish the job and do, and so on. Okay. And because of all this, as we said, the process time is improved and the data quality is improved. Okay. And I'm going to go into demo mode. I'm going to open the Kasei screen, and I'm going to show you the product. So the typical Kasei screen looks like this as you log in. This is from the Oracle Cloud instance. As I said, it can be run on your on-premise instance also. So we have a user ID called Jaya. I'm going to use this user ID because this person has access to multiple roles, like as opposed to using multiple users and different roles, like logging in and logging out. So I chose to do this way, so it is easier for all of us. So you can, like Kasei can handle multiple languages. So English is a chosen language here. So the Kasei screens will accordingly change based on the language you choose. And then as you see, like these are the notifications from whom it is coming, and then it is waiting on this person and so on. And these are actually the roles. So, or the responsibility or whatever you want to call it. So like typically, I'm just going to look at this role, which says ENN Kasei user, and the next one says GRM Kasei user. So what that means is ENN is an inventory organization, okay, and GRM is an inventory organization. So if I say ENN Kasei user, this particular person can create only records for ENN I mean, like, can create and handle data only for that particular inventory org, and they are cut out from the other things. Okay, so they are not able to see the other orgs and so on. And also, you see here you are not seeing any other icon other than the data icon. So it means they can have access only to certain templates and certain data here. Okay, and then you look at here, they have access to all the 6 templates. So they're not able to access multiple templates. Like there are lots of templates which we will see in future when we go through the demo. But this person is going to access only through these data. Okay, so like the data access control is handled. Now I am going and choosing this particular template called NA item search. Okay, so as part of the thing, I just wanted to let you know, this is like a demo system. Okay, it is running in our development server, so it could like appear slow as it is like sometimes, but actual production system, it's pretty fast and performance is pretty fast, and some of our users, some of our customers are using it. Okay, live, so that there is no issue around that. So here in this particular demo, what I'm going to do is, though we are going to talk about sourcing, okay? So the sourcing data, typically the configuration data, okay? It starts with an item. So I just want to, obviously it starts with the supplier also, which we are going to talk about it in a bit. But primarily, I just wanted to take this path because a lot of the functionality of Kasei is built in here, okay? So this is like a demo system based on which we just built a system for one of our customers. They just took this kind of a demo and then they said, yeah, it looks good. And then we made a lot of modifications for them and then we built it for them. So I thought it's a good idea to go over this. Okay. So the typical Kasei screen for data, it looks like this. It kind of like looks like an Excel spreadsheet. It can expand, like you can have lots and lots of columns here. There are no issues. And then users can create these names as the thing wants. Like for example, org, item number, item description. All these names are something which the users can choose, and they can put whatever they want and what is relevant for their users. It is not that nothing is fixed here. Right, so you can do it that way. So in this particular case, let us say a user comes in. So this person is an ENN user. So they are able to see ENN records, and they are also able to see the master item records, which is the SWA records. Why? Primarily because let us say they want to go and search for an item to see whether it is there in the system, which is either created by them or created by somebody else in a different org. Okay. Like, for example, these companies whom we really talk about, they have 45 orgs, 50 orgs like that. And some of the companies have like 5 to 6 orgs. It is okay. But the thing is, if the item is already created by somebody, you want to be able to take advantage of it. You don't have to create. So this is the first level of duplication check typically you do in for anything, right? So this person knows this item is manufactured by Siemens. So they just type Siemens in this filter, okay? So these are called favorite filters. That is, like we have all the list of filters. You see, based on all the columns here, you have filters, out of which they just chose this 5 or 6 filters as favorite, because constantly they'll be checking on this, okay? So they just entered Siemens, and then they're going to apply this thing, and they're looking for parts which are made by Siemens, okay? So one of the ways is obviously in the filter they could have put Siemens as well as the manufacturer part number also if they knew. If they did not know, they can just put Siemens, and then they can narrow the search in a different way, okay, and so on. So once they get this particular part here, you see like all the Siemens, anything which is Siemens, it just came here. So this person is able to see all the records. So there are 100 of 139 records. So there are only 139 records which the system found with this. So now they have the option of looking in the manufacturer part straight from here, or again they can go in and adding a manufacturer part with a filter, and then they can, like reapplying it, it will apply. Okay. So here, just to avoid, like all those things and the time confusion, I'm just going to choose an item. Let us say I choose this particular item. like for example, okay, I choose this item 310089. Okay, I'm going to choose this item. I'm going to look into the item description and everything. I thought, yeah, this is a manufacturer part I am looking for. It is not available in my org, but somebody has already created it. It's a stock item. I'm going to assign it to my org. Okay, so I go ahead and assign the item into my organization. And when I do the item to my organization, obviously this is like you're trying to create an item, right? So you have like a lot of input which you need to give. Okay, so typically if you look into this data, okay, I just chose this particular screen for specific reasons like this. You see here, you're not able to enter this data. It is already available. Like for example, item description is already created and it is controlled at the master level. So you are not able to change that. Item number is similarly, and org obviously you can't keep changing every time, right? But you can choose what kind of an item it is. Let us say you want it to be like a rebuildable item or whatever, you can choose it like that. So when I chose rebuildable, you see what happens was some of these fields became like, again, like you are not able to enter those values, okay? So like for example, instead of rebuildable, let us say if I make it as like non-trackable, then it says inventory locator field is mandatory. And if I keep going right, you see here, it is right now, it is able to see, like min max, it is able to tell me, like put the lead time days here, like those kind of things. You can enter those kind of values, okay, and so on. So I'm just going to leave that item as it is, okay. I'm going to choose another item. Let us say I'm going to choose this item, right? This is an item, let us say you created already. Let's go ahead and create a vendor. Let us go ahead and associate a vendor, okay? So I had two records there. So I unchecked one record. So for this particular record, if you really look at it, it goes to another screen, okay? So typically this is a way, you can kind of make the flow in a way your users will use the application, okay? So first, somebody created an item. Then they looked whether the item existed or not. Then they tried to assign it to their org. They found it, yeah, great. I assigned it to myself. And then, like now I'm going to assign a vendor. This is a part primarily which relates to sourcing, okay? So, like some people call it vendor, some people call it supplier. It doesn't matter. And we just, for some reason, we just chose it as a vendor here in this demo. So you just look at the list of vendors. Okay, this is typically all the suppliers, all the vendors from your Oracle screen. Okay, but of course it is like as you type, it will find more and more vendors and so on. So it can have thousands and 10,000 vendors. Okay, I'm going to choose some vendor for the. Let us say I'm going to choose like this company, 21st Century Science, okay? Then automatically the vendor site location, if it is there, it is going to get populated, okay? And then if there is an already vendor item existing, the list of vendor item will show, and then here you can add new. So this is one type of a list, okay, where you are giving control to the user, where you like you are telling them, okay, it is okay for you to enter the vendor item because you know about this data better, okay? So let us say I'm going to say July 07/24/01. So let's say this is a vendor item number, okay? And I save this item. And so then what happens is this particular item is associated, this particular vendor item is associated with this Oracle item number right now. Okay, and then if you really look at it, there is no workflow status, workflow node, everything is like blank here. So we got to really do something, like we got to validate. Like for example, if this vendor item is a duplicate, okay, let us assume this is already assigned to some other Oracle item number, okay, then the issue becomes something else. So you are trying to create a duplicate item in Oracle, but with a different description or whatever. So you got to do some more work and then figure it out what the issue was, right? So here I'm just going to choose the item, and then I'm going to choose validate. So if you really see here, it says validate 1. Sometimes, it may say validate 1, 2, 3, 4. Like validate 1 means it is one level of validation for this particular form which the workflow does. So now let us just go ahead and look at the record as it is refreshed here. So you go ahead and look at the record. You see here the workflow node is assigned right now. It is in node 10, and the vendor validation item complete is the workflow status. If it is an error, it will give you error, and like those kind of things. You will see like a lot of workflow statuses as you build this code, right? So I'm just going to close these two screens here, and I'm going back to my my original screen where we started with the NA item search, because here I'm going to talk about another process. So in this item creation workflow process, so the first thing is you go ahead and look for an item in some form. You go and look for searching for manufacturer or searching with a catalog name or whatever. So we use the filters, and we try to search for an item, right? And we found the item, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to assign it to my org, and then I'm going to do all that, right? So when I assign it to my org, I'm going to do basically there are two workflow steps there. So one workflow step is to validate, and another workflow step is to validate, and another workflow step is after validation is completed successfully, you submit the record. Okay. So in the second step, what we are going to talk about is how do you create items. So the assign item workflow is assign item workflow is what we did originally. So we just went through the item, you assigned the item, and you went through the vendor item, right? So similarly, create a new item. Let us say you want to create a new item right now. So here, there are some tricky things. I just want to show this particular piece because some of the functionality and the features of Kasei, you can see it here, okay? So first thing is that you see a validate button and you see a submit button. This is like typically the same button you will see when you are assigning the workflow also. And here also you see an associate vendor button, okay, and so on. So here, as I say, create item, let's go ahead and click the create button, okay? So in this particular flow, this is primarily for creating creating a maintenance part, okay? So, like you can have like multiple things, it could be like a finished good, it could be like a raw material item, it could be like anything. But based on the type of item, right, you can choose what kind of behavior your system should go through. So in this case, the behavior is for either it's a catalog item or a OEM item, okay? Let's just look at this, okay? If it is an OEM item, okay, then it says manufacturer, item description, all these three fields are mandatory. You see these automatically became, these are not usable, right? They are not editable right now. But let us say if I make this as catalog item, okay, then it says item class, subclass, etc. are mandatory. So you see this manufacturer, this part became kind of like non-editable, and this becomes editable. So let's just go ahead and create a catalog item. So you look at a catalog. So they already created a bunch of catalogs. So if you want to choose a catalog, you need to use this particular thing so that the item description is built correctly, okay? Let's just go ahead and choose a bearing, okay? So I said it's a bearing, and then when you choose bearing, automatically the list becomes the subclass list becomes relevant for bearing. What kind of a bearing it is, okay? It is like a flange mount bearing, or it's like a thrust bearing or whatever, right? So if it is a thrust bearing, then you see automatically I am changing the kind of attributes. So what is the enclosure? So you will just choose this enclosure. You will choose enclosure 2 is this. What kind of a material is this? What kind of a precision level you are looking for? And what type of a bearing it is, like that, right? So, but as you build and as you save, what happens is, you see like the item description is automatically getting built, okay? It is just nothing but a concatenation of all this. If it's a catalog item, it goes with a cat space pipeline symbol. You can also, you have the capability to add additional data here, and that also gets added here, okay? So I typed it in lowercase, it all changed into uppercase and so on. So here in this particular case, it was a bearing, thrust bearing, and so on. So instead of thrust, if you choose a different one, this item class attributes will totally be different for that. And like, for example, if you choose a rod end, okay, it'll be like a totally different kind of a thing, right? Grade, hand, and shank, and so on. So likewise, it keeps changing. This is the particular type of a lookup which you maintain in Kasei for your master data. So your master data can be pure. And then another thing about the master data, as I said, was what kind of an item you create, and what here the flow is the flow becomes separate for, like catalog item and the OEM item. Similarly, it could be like a raw material, it could be like a finished good, whatever item you are creating. Based on the rules, you can do this whole thing, okay, the way you want and so on. So again, finally, what kind of item templates you are choosing, I just chose that, and then the sub-inventory locator, all that comes, and the UOM comes from, like Oracle, okay, all these things come from Oracle. So people cannot randomly put data they want. So it kind of goes through this process, and then it makes sure that your data is validated as it goes through the system, and then finally, you can hit the validate button here, okay? So you went through the process. Let us say you even associated a vendor, and all those things are done, and finally you validated that process, right? So once you validate this, then the workflow status is going to change to item validate complete, okay? See, in some cases, the item validate error is there, okay? That is because there is something which is going on with that item. And then what kind of an error happens, you can see it in the Kasei message, okay? Those kind of things also happen, okay? So you will be able to see the messages, and you will be able to see the message log, means the total, all the messages which have happened with that particular record and so on. So once an item is validated, when you hit the submit button, so the submit button, what it does is, it is going to pick up only the records which are in item validate complete status, and it is going to submit. You cannot submit an error record. So like, because it is workflow controlled, and the logic is built in such a way, this is all very easy, okay? So once you validate, you move to submit, all you need to tell is this button. In order for this button to even pick up the records, these are the workflow statuses which are valid. Then only the submit button will work. So like that, you will build the thing, and then finally you submit the record. After you submit the record, this totally goes away from this person's view. I'm going to close this view totally, okay? So I'm talking a lot of things here, okay? I just, obviously this is like an 1 hour presentation, and part of it is a demo. I just want to make sure that you understand some of the primary functionality of the system. If you have any specific questions related to this functionality, if you are not able to address today, we will certainly, we can have a separate call and go over in detail each of the functionality, okay? And then before I go into other screen, I just wanted to show you a couple of things here. One is this filter button, okay, which we saw how the filter works. And then you have all these buttons for, creating a record, for saving, deleting a record. And then this is kind of the system validation, on the screen validation. This is refresh, and this is called a form view. A form view is, instead of the horizontal view, you want a vertical view, like a single record view, you can go with the form view, right? And then you can kind of download these records into an Excel template. All these records, you want to take it to Excel, you could do that. And then you can also upload records. Upload record means you already have the records, let us say thousands of records you have created in an Excel spreadsheet. You want them to be loaded into this. So all you need to do is you need to get this particular template. So this process will walk you through that thing, okay? How do you import data into a template? So through this process, you will go ahead and put the records and everything, and then you will be able to upload mass data. And then you can, it will, all the data will come with the workflow status, the initial workflow status of, let us say, draft or whatever, and then it will go through the entire process, okay? So here in this workflow, users like this ENN Kasei user and GA or Kasei users, these are all the site users. They created their records, and then all the records got submitted by them, and then it goes to this particular person, the person with this role called EBS administrator. Okay, so this EBS administrator is able to do much more things. You see more icons here. So this person is able to handle users. They are able to create users. They're able to create roles and assign users to roles, and like those kind of things. And then they are able to even see data, and they are even able to even create templates. Template is a way, like all these things, whatever you created, like this field should work with this LOE. All those things are defined here. Okay, so all this is they're able to show. And then I'm just going to go into this person's view, right? So here, what happened? Okay, what happened was, all this person did was, earlier, they created an item, they put in a bunch of data, they associated a vendor, and they saved the records and submitted it. Now, let us say I'm going to be the user here. I'm going to look at the item, right? I'm just going to look at a couple of items just to see what is going on. So here you see my buttons totally changed. On the top, if you see here, I have an approve button, approve for reload and load item. So if you see approve button, I can even reject records. So which means the record goes back to the person who created, okay? And approved for reload is primarily whenever there is an error, I fix the error and I say approve for reload. So the next time the load process runs, it is going to pick up, okay? The load item is, if I want to load any individual record, one record at a time, I can load, but normally this may not be used because this is like a slow process, right? Which is what we want to avoid. You load an item, then you load its category, then you load its sub-inventory, then you load the manufacturer. Like that, if you keep doing in 10, 15 steps, it takes a lot of time. So, but the functionality is costly, right? So in this case, let us look at any record. So if you look at the, first let's go to the workflow status and then see some of these workflow statuses. What you have is submitted for approval is a workflow status. Okay, and then it is node 20. And the item load complete. It means this load already went into Oracle, node 310, okay, and so on. So, but this field here called batch number, this person used the batch number to load the items, okay. So, I'm going to show you that in a minute. But what exactly happened is, as the records got validated, and as it came here, let us say if I just choose one of these records, and if I say approve, okay. This is for submitted for approval, right? So if the next record, I need to take this record, not the one above. So I'm taking the submitted for approval record. Let us say if I go ahead and say approve, okay. So the workflow is able to pick up this record, and when I approve, what happens is it does like a bunch of things. It first says, okay, I'm going to, it is going to take this record, already validated record. It is going to take this item. And the information available here, it is going to split it into multiple ways so that the record can be created as an item record can be created, item categories, item sub-inventory locators, and sourcing rules, sourcing rule assignments, and approved supplier lists, okay, and even BPAs if you have set up that way. So all these 7 steps can happen, okay. I'm going to show how that happens, right? So this person also has the capability to load data. So we have another template here called data load batches. Okay. So in this, when you go into this template, okay, you see some buttons here, right? You see like load assets and load asset group. That is for loading the enterprise asset management equipment data, right? The equipments and the equipment group and so on. Okay. So on the left, you see here like load items, load sourcing data, load supplier. So we have separate buttons for all these, but still, load sourcing data is going to load a bunch of things, which I'm going to show it to you in a minute. And then the same way with the load items. Okay. So all this person does is he just creates a new batch, and then the batch number is automatically assigned. Let us say whatever batch they want to create. I'm going to call it July 2401. And I'm going to say, like my comment is loading items for demo, like something like that I will do. And if I'm going to load items for demo, I'll just click this button. Instead of loading items, let us say this is to load sourcing data. I get, like the comment 2 is just for our information sake. There's no big deal. If I just click on this load sourcing data, the same batch will be applied for that. So the batch number is just a placeholder which will associate with any of these buttons and it will load. Okay, so let us look at a couple of batches which are already there. I'm going to look for this particular batch number 10944. Okay, and so it just filtered the record and then one batch came. So this is an already loaded batch. Of course, like they're not loading a whole lot of records because this is all demo and then little bit they will try to do. So in this particular batch, let us look at the load report. Okay. After all they did was they just created the batch and they clicked on this load item. Okay. So immediately it kind of like looked for records with a particular workflow status, which is kind of like, like approved for load is the workflow status. It just took all the records with approved for load in items, and then it started doing certain things. First, what it did was NA item. That is that particular template from where it is. And then it found 3 records. So it successfully loaded 2 records, but it did not load 1 record. So then it says, see NA item template to look at individual errors, like that it said. So after loading an item, because two items were loaded successfully, then it immediately took the record to category. When it says number of items read 2, record successfully loaded only 1. We don't know why the other one failed. So it says record failure 1. And then for sub-inventory, it says number of records 2, record successfully loaded 2. All the records were loaded successfully. Then for manufacturer, it took one record for manufacturer and loaded it. This, like here there are no errors. Primarily based on some logic, there may be only 1 record for which you need to load manufacturer. So accordingly, it just changes, right? So the idea is what it does is, it is able to, like from the data what the person put in and approved, it is able to do all this continuously as a sequence. So this is one part of the automation Kasei does very efficiently, and it is able to take these records and then load it. Okay, I'm gonna look into this error. For example, NA item template, right? This error, whatever it is, I can look at it, and then like I can go and fix the error. I will change the workflow status to approve for reload. So next time when I create an item batch and hit this button, it will pick up the record and load it. Okay, which I don't want to show right now for one of time. And then I'm going to load, actually for the sourcing data, let's look at batch number 11602. Okay, so when I check this particular batch, this was loaded primarily for the sourcing data. Let us see what happened in this. So if I go ahead and look at it, you see from the item record, automatically sourcing rule was created. The sourcing rule assignment was created, ASL record was created, blanket record was created for loading. Nobody did any work to create them. So once this is done, you see any sourcing rule, number of records read 1, number of records successfully loaded, actually it was 0 for whatever reason, there was a failure. So because sourcing rule was not loaded, sourcing assignment was not loaded, and approved supplier list was not loaded, and blanket agreement was not loaded. So I am able to show you, successful records also. But as I was scanning this morning, I just wanted to bring home this point. This particular point is, you see, the loading happens one after the other. First, the sourcing rule happens, and the sourcing rule assignment, and approved supplier list and blanket agreements. All this happens in a sequence one after the other, based on the previous step, how it behaved. Okay, it doesn't stop. Successful records move along. Records whichever stop in whichever stage, you can go ahead and fix them, and then you can move them, and so on, right? So this is how this whole process works. And here, instead of manually coming and clicking, if you ask me, hey, you know what, I just want this to happen at a specific time of a day. Let us say, every day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I want these processes to run and load items. Yes, automatically, you can schedule this batch. So once you create the schedule, you will automatically see at 3 o'clock here saying batch number, load item, blah, 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 and batch item, load sourcing data, blah, 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 like that it will keep loading. and you will see all this record information here and so on. You don't have to even like touch anything. It will go ahead and automatically create those things. Okay. Anyway, we have only 7 minutes. I just wanted to go over the sourcing processes also, but obviously we are running out of time. So like in that process, if you want to create a supplier, we have a sourcing specialist, sourcing manager, and supplier self-service, and so on. So the supplier self-service is really wanted to touch with that. So you are able to share your data with the supplier as much as you can through Kasei, and they can kind of like update their data, like like if their address changes there, whatever is there, they can update their data, and then they can keep their data ready. For example, their insurance policies and that and this, they can upload it themselves. Okay, so it is like highly segmented. They will see only their data. They cannot see some other suppliers' data, like what I showed here. Okay, and then what happens is you can go through our workflow process, and then go ahead and approve the record, and then it goes into Oracle and updates the supplier. So similarly for creating the supplier and so on. Okay, so I'm going to end here right now, and briefly saying that like we have other use cases which you will see even in our website, and some of these use cases are already being used by our customers. Okay, and what we saw today was the sourcing challenges on a day-to-day basis, how they can be handled with Kasei by producing high-quality data and by orchestrating and automating your processes in a very efficient manner, and also by integrating, like your target systems, which could be even your legacy systems, and also with your Oracle system. So I will pass it on to Will right now. Will?
Yeah, just to wrap up. So as I had alluded to earlier, so thank you, Ravi, for showing us Kasei and for walking us through some of those features and processes and how they look in the Kasei screens. As I alluded to earlier, we're aligned with Oracle and with the world. The way that it is going now is towards cloud. And so I just wanted to briefly touch on Kasei, obviously, used not just for sourcing, but for many other data integration and orchestration and automation projects and processes. And one of those is also in getting companies ready for or actually moving them to cloud applications. And so that can be in a process like adopting Kasei for sourcing to be able to maintain clean, supplier data, to be able to be ready for then when you transition to continue to use that same product, Kasei, with your new Oracle product. But it can also be used as a data migration tool and to do a guided, not just a lift and shift, but a guided migration of data to Oracle cloud applications, so that when you are in those new environments, you're getting more out of those environments than you got from your on-premise versions. So I want to just I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to give you a chance, if you'd like, to use the question and answers to ask any questions, and I'll check and see if I have any questions here. Let's see. One question: Are these templates you showed already created and fixed? Can we name the templates and the columns the way we want and associate the API data to load into Oracle, EBS, or cloud? Did you cover this, Ravi?
Maybe I've covered it a little bit, but of course, it's a very valid question usually people ask. So the question is about, like some of the names you saw, right? Like the org and the inventory item and supplier and vendor and all that. Should that be the same, or it could be anything else? Yes, it could be anything else. Like for example, instead of calling a vendor item, you can call it as a supplier item, or whatever you choose for your org is valid. You can call anything the way you want. But the only thing is there is an API which, like there is a REST API, right? And the REST API columns are basically mapped into Oracle, right? So those columns should be mapped into this template column. There is a way to do that. It's a very simple process. So you just say this column, supplier item, Oracle, supplier underscore item, let us say Oracle, corresponds to vendor item of my template. So like that, you will map it, and then you kind of like compile the function, and then it works that way. Okay. So I hope that is like answered. But if somebody has this question, they can always get back to us, and I can show them how exactly this is done.
And one other question, are any customers currently using this product for the use cases that you're talking about?
Yeah, sure. So do you want to talk about it? I can say that. Let me take that. So, we have at least 2 large customers, okay, like who are Fortune 500 companies who are using Kasei. Like one particular customer is using it for building like primarily data for their asset reliability and those kind of things. They have, they're across the entire globe, but right now they have implemented Kasei for North America, and their goal is to roll it out for rest of the world. Okay, that's number one. And number 2, our other customer, they are using it primarily for all kinds of data migration. Initially, they did that, and right now they are wanting more out of Kasei in terms of their day-to-day operational scheme. So they were using like a one-on-one migration kind of a tool, and now they're changing it the way I showed you, right? Like people search data and then they don't find it, they create data, like that kind of a flow. They're building it right now and they're using it. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, if you'd like to learn any more information, we've recently revamped our website as well. So go to www.hamiltonianusa.com. And again, that was Ravi. My name is William. My name is up on the screen with my contact information. And I will be sending out a recording to everyone who registered and everyone who attended. Thank you all so much for being with us today, and hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, everybody.